So it started. We're recording. Now I'm going to start Facebook. So we're going to be live on Facebook, and then I'll start sharing. Okay. Share to a page. Em, are you there? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and I am here. I'm ready to push it whenever you hit it.
Okay, so I'm going live now. I'll let you know when it says. So it says we are live. And I'm just going to start sharing and then go on mute for now. So one thing, I know I'm not supposed to be talking, but it says my internet connection is unstable. So if I disappear, just keep going. I don't think it's dependent on my internet connection.
Hello?
Hi, Carlton, welcome. We're live. We're going to
Okay.
get started. We were just waiting on you to join, but we're live.
All right, sorry about running late.
That's okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Depelsha Magruder, the founder of Mob United, and we are so excited about the conversation we're going to have today. We think it's a very important conversation, a critical conversation, and we have a very special guest who I've been wanting to meet and talk to since the founding of the organization. So we'll get to that in a minute, but first I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are in case you're joining for the first time. So Mob United was founded in the summer of 2016, July 7th, 2016, following the back-to-back killings of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge and Philando Castile in Minnesota. And that is a very significant point in light of who our guest is today, which is Miss Valerie Castile, Philando's mother. So if you've heard me tell this story before, you know that the morning of July 7th, I woke up and turned on CNN and had gone to bed the night before seeing Alton Sterling's family on the news and the graphic images of his death. Woke up the next morning and saw Philando's family in Minnesota and just could not connect the dots in my brain. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand if this was a continuation of the conversation from the night before, and these were relatives in Minnesota. But once I figured out that it was actually a completely separate incident that also had a very graphic and brutal video, I just broke inside. I was in bed, I couldn't get up. I felt paralyzed, deeply saddened, confused, angry, all these emotions that I didn't know how to process. And all I knew to do is to try to connect with other moms of Black sons who could understand what I was feeling, the sense of despair. And I went on Facebook and activated an idea that I'd had all the way back to, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and other cases, and started a Facebook group, only sent it to about 30 friends. And people just started joining the group and went viral. It took off from there because everyone was feeling those same emotions. And we ended up very quickly forming two nonprofit organizations to try to advocate to change policies and perceptions that impact particularly how Black boys and men are treated and perceived by law enforcement and society as a whole. So we have Moms of Black Boys United, our 501c3, which is the information and support side of the equation, education like this, providing support for moms in different situations they're trying to navigate with their sons, and self-care, all those kinds of things. And we also have Mob United for Social Change, which is our 501c4 advocacy organization. And through that organization, we advocate for policy change and speak out on current cases. And there have been so many cases, as you all know, since 5 years ago. So that's who we are. Our approach is, we have a 5-pillar approach. Our aim is to influence policy, change perceptions of Black males from negative to positive. We want to demonstrate our power, that's politically and economically. We want to partner strategically with like-minded individuals and organizations. And fifth, but not least important, we want to promote self-care, because this is a treacherous journey of trying to just manage our own mental health and wellness and physical health as we're constantly assaulted with these stories and images. And many moms in our group have experienced the loss of children. So that's who we are. And I just want to get to the conversation and our speaker. So I want to turn it over to a very special person in our organization, Lisa Burton. She's our DC chapter lead, and she has a distinct honor of being both Black and Blue, meaning that she is a former law enforcement officer herself, so she understands this from multiple perspectives. And she initially connected with Ms. Castile. I'll let her tell the story on how, but Lisa, if you don't mind, if you can just introduce our special guest today. You're on mute.
My apologies, my first glitch of the day. It won't be my last, trust me. Good morning, or good afternoon, actually. We usually do these in the morning. I'm excited for us to be here today. We've been going towards this day for a moment now. Miss Castile, I refer to her, you will hear me refer to her as Mama Castile, Mama Val, that's what I refer to her as. We met about 2.5 years ago at an Alliance for Safe Traffic Stops. It was a round table. And I was absolutely taken aback by the story when she told the story to all of us about Philando. And this was a nonprofit group that asked me to facilitate it. And I met her. And afterwards, we talked about, the pain of it and just how we needed to move forward. And we promised each other that day that we would take a step in forward, and that's how we got here today.
And Lisa, do you also want to introduce Carlton?
And so Carlton is also joining us today. He's a civil rights attorney and police reform expert, Carlton Mayers II. He advocates for police accountability through a racial justice and equity lens, and he's very important to this equation as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you so much for being here with us today. And we wanted to have this conversation partially because of where we are right now in society and our history. As everyone knows, I had that reaction in the summer of 2016, but fast forward to the summer of 2020, the whole world had, visceral, very strong reaction in the wake of killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery that summer. And it was a global response. And, all of this talk about racial equity and reform, and so many people who were not even aware of these issues, cared about these issues, getting on board, speaking out, asking what they can do. Then there was the big push for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in Congress that everyone said they're going to make it happen, it's going to pass. There were a lot of reforms in that bill, and then it just didn't happen. And so I find myself wondering, the question on the flyer, where do we go from here? And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. Let me just, let me stop sharing so we can see our lovely guests. So we want to talk about that, but before we get to that, I first just want to welcome you, Ms. Castile. What do you prefer, Mama Val, Ms. Castile?
I guess you can call me Mama Val, because my name is Valerie, so it doesn't matter, but I don't know, because of my position and how strongly I feel about our children, a lot of people call me Mama Val just for that reason.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I will go with that. Well, first, I just want to welcome you and say thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to meet you and to have you in conversation today. And I was wondering if you can just start really wherever you want to. But I think, since everyone in our organization is a mom of a Black son, and want the world to see, one of the things we always say is that we want the world to see our sons through the same loving eyes that we do, as human beings who are fully worthy of respect and dignity and equal treatment. We're full of hopes and dreams, and to be treated fairly. So I was wondering if you could just start by telling us a little bit about Philando and what he was like and some of the things you love most about him.
Philando was, or should I say, is a very kind and gentle soul. He came when I was told that I couldn't have children, but I had him when I turned 27. He was a surprise, because I was thinking that, okay, these people obviously know their business, but it was just a joy. He brought a lot of calm into my life. He came at a moment that I was self-destructing, and I always referred to him as saving my life, and I, go back and think about that, and then think about what happened to him, where he saved my life, but I couldn't save his. I was at rock bottom, and God just lifted me up when he presented me with this beautiful baby boy. He was a quiet little boy. He never got into any trouble at school. I never had to go to school to defend his behavior. He was always a model child. He has, I've shared on social media, student of the week, a picture of him with the little paper, and it had student of the week on it. But he always did what he was asked, whatever I asked him to do, he did it. He trusted his mother. He was just a remarkable young man, very, very quiet. Friends would come over and say, "Where's Philando?" I said, "He's in there in his room." And they was like, "Lord, that boy's so quiet, you wouldn't even know he was at home." And I'd be like, "Yeah, and I like it like that too." So he was just a great kid. He just was a normal child. He did well in school. He actually liked school. You know, he would have to wake me up. I worked nights and come home and lay down. He'd wake me up. Mom, I gotta go to school. You're gonna make me late. So I get up and get him out of there because he put his own clothes on, baby. He was ready to get away from me, obviously. But he was just a loving young man. And when he was 13, he asked me for some Jordan sneakers. And those sneakers always been $100. They've never gone down, but they've gone up. But at the time they were $100. And I told him, I said, son, you need a job. So at 13, I signed papers for him to work through the summer school program. And after the summer school program, they had laid him off, but I saw other kids were still working. So yeah, I went and I had that conversation with them. Why is my son not continuing to work during the school year? And yeah, I put a little pressure on him and they accepted him back. And he was gainfully employed until the time he was denied his right to live. He had worked hard as a nutrition aide until he became a supervisor. 30 years old, a supervisor in a school cafeteria. Actually, it's unheard of. When I was coming up in school, all our lunch people were older white women. And they be old, I'm telling you. I was like, they must be paying good because they don't want to leave. But he was devoted to his job. He knew all the children by name. He knew all of their allergies. He knew their PIN codes. Great young man. He'd help the disabled children get on and off the bus during school time. He would even help, children make friends when they new to the school. I've had these stories, told to me by some of the students. These are not anything that I'm making up. These are things that other people have told me because, I'm at home. I don't know what's going on. And he know how to separate his work life from his home life. And that's something that a lot of employees tell you. You keep your problems at home. Don't bring problems to work, which unfortunately the police do. So that's a different conversation. But my son was a loving, giving, caring person. Sometimes when children didn't have the fees for the lunch, he would pay for them out of his pocket. So he was just a remarkable young man. And I miss him dearly. He was a pillar within the community. He supported Black businesses. He made sure he spent his money in the community that he lived and grew up in. So he was just this all around good guy. It was just so personal when his life was taken. The day he was denied his right to live, I took that very, very personal because he was important to me. We all want the best for our children. And I thought I tried everything humanly possible. I told him everything he needed to know to prepare him for this world. But I guess my work wasn't good enough, or God told me don't take responsibility for somebody else's action. You did nothing wrong. You taught him everything that he needed to know. He ran into an idiot. You understand? I taught him. There was the absent father. I taught him how to treat a woman. I taught him how to play basketball and baseball and how to change a tire and how to, change his oil. But he wasn't finna do none of that. He was like, thanks, Mom, but I called AAA. So, but I taught him manly things that a man should teach him. I taught him about sex and to wear a condom and, you know, don't have children out of wedlock, to, you know, find someone who loves you like you love them and marry and prepare for your children. You know, I just did everything that I could as a mother, you know, protecting their child, because there are pitfalls. I know the pitfalls because I fell into them. So what I tried to do was to teach my children about different pitfalls so that they didn't have to go through those tribulations like I had to do. So yeah, he was just a loving individual that cared deeply about his community and the children that he served, and he'd do anything for his mother and his sister.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. He sounds like a beautiful person, and it sounds like you did a wonderful job. And I know, you know, you look back on a situation like this and say, what more could I have done? But I'm sure you did all you could do. But if you meet a fool, which is what happened that day, you know, there was nothing more you could have done to protect him. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. And I know one of the things we've heard in the news and you shared is that before the day, the way that you put it, that he was denied the right to live, which I think is a really poignant way to put it, that he had been stopped many times before that day, right? Like he had been harassed, it sounded like. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that and what that was like for him and what impact that had on him?
Philando, like I said, he started working when he was 13. And when he turned, I think 17 or 18, he wanted this car, and he was adamant about this car. It was a 84 T-top Monte Carlos, pristine condition. He wanted this car, and I said, son, you know, I will help you get a car, but as everything else, I'll meet you halfway. You pay half and I pay half. And he had got his half, and he was like, Mom, can we go get the car? And I was looking at him like, okay, we're gonna go get the car. The man was in tears. And I'll never forget, he said, I have to have that car. And I looked at him, and he was about to cry, and he said, I need that car. So I called my nephew, and we went and purchased it the next day. And he didn't have license. I ain't even gonna lie. You know, I had told him, don't drive the car because you don't have license, but he drove it anyway to get to work. And he got stopped. And that was actually the beginning of the end. I think it is documented 52 times, but then if you look at the undocumented times that he was stopped, he probably was stopped over 60 times, and he had been driving like, I'm gonna throw 15 years out there. I mean, you do the math. You've been driving for 15 years and you've been pulled over 60 times, then there is a problem. But anytime the police can say that there was some malfunction or some type of vehicle equipment violation, they can pull you over because that's considered probable cause. And that's what they did to him every time they saw him. Every time, and it was to the point where, you know, he either this is stereotyping and racially profiling and harassment, or he the unluckiest motherfucker on the planet. Excuse me, but no, not excuse me. That's the way I looked at it. I said, either is that, or he just that unlucky. Because I'm gonna tell you something. It wasn't just Minnesota. He's been pulled over in Missouri, Wisconsin, Iowa, I mean, it's like he was this freaking magnet for the police. And I'm telling you, either he was just an unlucky son of a gun born on this planet, or this is what it was, you know. But with the law, they changed racial profiling and stereotyping to probable cause. So now instead of stopping the person because they're Black, that's the real bottom line. But then it'll be, oh, his tail light was out. Oh,
Right.
the light over his license plate was out. Oh, there was a donut on the car. Oh, there was a crack in the windshield. Oh, there was an incense hanging from the mirror. Oh, the side mirror was gone on the car. Oh, you know, on and on and on.
Right. You can always find something, right? But white people don't get stopped for these things. They're not going to be the ones.
Absolutely.
And I know Philadelphia just has some kind of ordinance where they said you can't stop people for those basic traffic violations or car violations. Lisa, I believe you sent that to us. What do you all think about that? Do you think that will make a difference?
I think that it could. It's at least a step in the right direction. I'd be interested in hearing what Carlton has to say about that, Philly being the first one to do it. I think that not being able to do it as a primary reason to stop is critical. And hopefully it'll make some type of impact. It's obviously not the answer. It's just one possible thing to at least go in the right direction. I think it's significant.
Yeah,
Carlton,
I think that it's definitely a step in the right direction because, you know, I just want people to understand these things that they're giving us. This is nothing new. These things, these issues and problems have been going on for centuries. Do you hear what I say? Do you understand what I say? Do you understand what I'm saying? They have been going on for years, and we have been asking for these minute laws and policy changes for decades, people. We're not talking about nothing new. Ain't none of this stuff new. Not none of it. And I think it's a move in a positive direction. But you have to think about it. Are they gonna do it? Are they gonna do it? Because they're figuring out another excuse.
What do you think about the direction things are going in right now? And just talk to us a little bit about the journey you've been on over the past 5 years. I know you've been busy with all kinds of initiatives. So I'd love to hear about that, but also just have you seen progress? Do you feel like there's progress?
Tell me what I ain't been advocating for. I'm telling you, baby. When my son was murdered, this is who you get right here, because you dumped that mess on my doorstep. I didn't go looking for a problem or issue, you know. I did my little thing and, you know, supported this charity or this foundation, things like that. I wasn't on the forefront, but now here I am. I have been involved in several working groups, several panels. I've been involved in policy changes. You know, I stood with Representative Ilhan Omar on the no lunch shaming bill back in, I think, 2019. And we were instrumental in the update of the Minnesota driver's license manual, where a section was put in there about gun ownership and what the police should do and what you should expect from the police and what the police should expect from the driver. And, you know, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to go home. So if we get a sort of a set standard for police stops, you know, what to look for and what to do and what not to do, then both parties can go home, you know. So we were instrumental in accomplishing that. But, you know, the police reforms this year, you know, we advocated for a lot of things, and we did get some things, but some of the critical ones we didn't get. But I do want to talk a little bit about something that I just found out last night while I was trying to do a little bit of research and stuff like that, which I didn't know, and I don't think a lot of other people knew about the language change in the deadly use of the use of force policy. You know, we didn't know, I didn't know. I'm not gonna say we, I take responsibility for not knowing on my own, but there was a part in there about the language change that you have to be an imminent threat. Your life has to be in imminent danger, and that was done the end of July is when this happened, and right now they at the Supreme Court trying to take it back. You know what I'm saying? They changed the language. It's like you have to be an imminent threat. So that means that if someone is running away from you, you cannot shoot them in the back anymore. Okay, this is huge. This is huge. I did not know that. You know, and
Which you shouldn't anyway, by the way. Like, why are you shooting people who are running away who aren't a threat?
Right.
But they trying to change it back. I found that article in one of the smaller newspapers. It wasn't in the big newspaper, the Star Tribune or the Pioneer Press. I didn't see it there. It was in Mempost. And I was like, holy cow, I did not even know. But they were saying that they wasn't going to put even though it passed, they wasn't going to put the law in effect until the officers were retrained or something like that, you know, the sneaky mess. Instead of doing that, they at the Supreme Court right now to take it back. And the reason they're doing that is because neighboring states are not willing to come here to help the state of Minnesota because they can't get away with murder. Praise the Lord.
Wow, that's deep. So I want to bring Carlton Mayers into this conversation. He is a consultant, police reform expert, attorney, also wears many hats. To get your perspective on this point in terms of how the landscape has changed over the past 5 years and some of the, you know, policy changes you see. There have been policy changes in various cities, maybe not at the federal level, but in a number of jurisdictions, there has been some change. So I just want to get your perspective on that. Then Ms. Mama Val, we're going to get back to what you've been up to over the past 5 years, because I do want to hear that as well.
Yeah.
And Carlton?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for having me. And, you know, it's an honor to be here with Ms. Castile. So, yeah, you know, we know that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act did not pass in Congress for a second time. And so that's the bad news. The good news, though, the silver lining, is that there were more than 30 states across the US that did pass substantive, comprehensive policing reform legislation. There were also several municipalities on the local level that also passed laws, either through ordinance and or through ballot initiative, all related to policing reform. And what's interesting is that, you know, like for instance, Minneapolis passed a law prohibiting the use of the chokehold by law enforcement under no circumstance. Like under any circumstance, they are not allowed to use a chokehold. But then the state law in Minnesota that passed this year only passed a chokehold restriction and not an actual chokehold ban. And so officers are not allowed to use it unless there's, going back to what Ms. Castile just talked about, unless there's an imminent threat that's posed to the officer or somebody else of great bodily harm or death. That's when an officer can use a chokehold. And so what we're seeing is that the state laws that were passed are actually not as progressive or as forward-looking as the local level laws that passed. like you just talked about Philadelphia, passing an ordinance that would prohibit officers from pulling over motorists for low-level infractions like broken taillight, et cetera. I know that Pittsburgh is now looking at introducing and passing a similar ordinance. And so, we're seeing a lot on the local level really happening to move forward in alignment with the demands from last year's protests, which were not only national in scope, but global, all calling for Black Lives Matter and substantive police accountability. So I do believe that going further, what we need to focus on is not only continuing to pass laws on the state and local level, which seems like that's a lot more doable than trying to get it done on the federal level, at least with this current composition of Congress, where Senator Manchin and Sinema are really the ones leading, the decision making. It's not the president. And so, under this current composition of Congress, I don't think we're going to see any kind of movement on policing reform on the federal level. But we are seeing a lot of movement on the state and local level. There's still a number of states that have not passed substantive policing police reform legislation, which I think they're going to try to do in 2022 legislative session. And then the states that did pass substantive policing reform legislation, there's two things that they're focused on. One of them is passing bills that are still in limbo right now, but did not get passed this year, trying to get those passed next year. And then the second one, which I think is even more important, is focusing on the laws that did pass this year. What does implementation look like? So that way we are actually bringing about the kind of change that we intended when we introduced that law and got it passed. And so those are the two major things going forward. And that also applies to the local laws as well. What does implementation look like? And right now, I would say, depending on the state, depending on the locality, is really what's determining if there's actual implementation happening, or if essentially you're just seeing pushing of papers, meaning that laws get passed, they get shelved, they look good, but they don't change anything because they're not being implemented effectively.
Right. And what's the best entry point for us as citizens, particularly as moms who are passionate about these issues? Should we be focused on getting those additional bills passed, or should we try to be a part of the conversation on implementation? And whichever it is, how do we do that?
I think both. So, I do believe that the best way to bring about policing reform is to engage law enforcement, local and elected appointed government officials, the decision makers on it. Engage them in different ways. Engage them on the national legislation. Still need to push on that to get that done. Engage them on the state legislation if it has to do with getting bills passed or it has to do with implementation. And also the same thing with the local legislation. Engage them on that as well. And what I think the best thing to do is, number one, if your state and or municipality has passed policing reform legislation into law, no matter if it's ordinance, state law, ballot initiative, you need to start monitoring the implementation of that law. Like, know what the law is, number one. Educate people in your community on what that law is, and then start monitoring the implementation. Know who's responsible for implementing it. Is it the law enforcement agency? Is it maybe the state attorney general, et cetera? And then who's responsible for holding that implementing entity accountable? In other words, if that implementing entity, like a law enforcement agency, is not implementing the law, which they're supposed to do, whose responsibility is it to hold them accountable? Is it your state General Assembly member, or is it another state entity? And at that point, that's how you can start to engage on making sure that the law is being adhered to.
Thank you. I want to go back to Mama Val to see if there's anything you want to add on any of that, but also to talk about, you are one example of somebody who's been thrust into being an advocate. I don't know, how involved you were in advocating for all these issues before this happened to your son, but now, as you said, the last 5 years, you've been advocating on all kinds of things: criminal justice reform, school lunch for kids. You've started a peace garden. I would just love for you to break down a little bit more about your work and the foundation you started in Belendo's honor, and just how you've been spending your time and what impact that's had on you to get into advocacy work.
Yeah, like I said, I've been thrust into an arena that I know nothing about. I've been involved with attorneys and schools and being an advocate out here. After Philando was denied his right to live and was murdered, the community came together. Amazing. They definitely were very, very supportive, and they came to that spot, and that's my beautiful grandbaby. If y'all hear that noise, that's her. She can do anything, because we gonna keep it moving, because she's very important, and a lot of the work that I do is for her as well, and your babies too. They started the Peace Garden. I didn't do any of that. They started the Peace Garden. That space is considered hallowed ground. There is a beautiful spirit there, and people know that, and they go there for just a peace of mind, and to have a little solace, and to do some soul searching, and just kind of think about yourself, and why things happen the way they do in this world, and what can you do to change it. And they go there faithfully. So, God plays a big role in my life, the spirit of my son and the ancestors. I wanted to make the community more comfortable. So in terms, right now that space is under renewal, because it's there, and we wanted to bring it up a notch, so it's being renewed, and it's going to be beautiful, and people have been so supportive in everything that I do, all the things that have been created in his honor. There's a $5,000 scholarship from the school that he graduated from. Central High School has a Philando Castile Memorial Scholarship in his honor. There's a beautiful marble bench where he worked at J.J. Hill Montessori Elementary School. There's this beautiful marble bench that was put there in his honor. And there's a mural on Selby and Avon, and come to find out, it's the side of the building where Philando held his first job. Wow. It's all about this type of 360 effect, where you may have had a relationship with my son and you didn't even know it. And it's just so uplifting to know that God has put a lot of beautiful spirits into my life, like you ladies. We all want the best for our children. We want things to change. And, God will use you. He may take something from you to bring out that spirit in you to help other people. It's just a lot that I've been a part of. I was a part of the toolkit, the prosecution for what a prosecutor may do in terms of a fatality. It's information about how the investigation should go, what the BCA should do, the things that a prosecutor can and cannot do. It's just a variety of information, and it's very flexible, and it can be utilized in different police departments and jurisdictions. And that was presented February in 2019, but it's got so much information, and I don't know if they're afraid of it, because it is doable, it's workable, it's great information. But yeah, I've been involved in so many things. Town hall meetings would be really important for people. If you're advocating for something, always have town hall meetings where everybody is there, everybody can have their input, because there's no wrong answers. Everybody has something that they can say that may be able to be used. And it's just been a real hell of a journey. You know, the easiest thing that I could have did was not to do anything, you know, just sit back and mourn, but that's not what God had for me. And I am a strong advocate because I want what's best for our children, what's best for our boys and girls as far as their education, being able to have that right to live and not be afraid. You know, there are a lot of things that happens in our lives that puts us in different situations and different categories of life, but we're still human beings at the end of the day. When you come into contact with the police, everybody wants to go home. Your life is not more valuable than mine. And I thought about some things with that fake trial of Philando. I honestly think now that that man's life and was balanced. It wasn't balanced. It was kind of, is his life more valuable than this guy? You know,
Right.
do we want to mess up his career or really?
When you lost your son. Yeah. Yeah. So Mom, how do we come back around? Because the biggest piece that we talked about is that there's no trust, right? There's no trust. So how do we now bridge that gap between the police and the people to, you know, to have some healing and some community unity? Like, what can we do on both sides so we all come to the table? You know, how do we begin to heal that? You know, what can we do at the table on the police end, you know, in the community to start to build the trust and start the healing? I know you did the toolkit, but aside from that, like, what would you say to the chiefs of police or the people, you know, about incorporating the community?
But you know what's so what's easy is, you know, you ride around in your car all day. Why don't you get, you know, you come in our community every single day. Nobody knows your name. You understand what I'm saying? When I was coming up, they had, you know, the police would park their cars and get out and walk around and meet the people.
Engagement.
The police knew who the bad kids was in the neighborhood because they got out and they met them. You know, back when I was young, you know, my brothers or their friends do something, then the police would bring them home and say, Miss Castile, he was doing this and that. And if I catch him doing it again, I'm going to have to arrest him. You know, it's all about communication. You know, get out, walk around, talk, get to know the people that you're policing, you know, and then maybe if you know their background and their history, you won't be so quick to kill them because, you know, we're all human beings. And then I'll say it again about town hall meetings, you know, come into the neighborhood and tell us what kind of policies you guys are coming up with, and you know what can the community do to make this transition better. You know, it's all about communicating and developing that level of trust, because we you know, kids used to say that they wanted to be a police. They don't want to be a police anymore because, you know, look at your track record. You know, nobody want to be a police because if you support someone's bad behavior, that's a black eye on all police and the police department, because you're supporting bad behavior, you know, and you think anybody wants to be a part of that, and they know that a lot of it it surfaces around
the lack of accountability, right? The lack of accountability is used.
Absolutely. So yeah, just having those town hall meetings and getting together and doing some things together. I mean, you see a lot of dancing with the community and things of that nature. Ain't nothing wrong with it, but my goodness, can you get to know me other than on the dance floor?
Relationship.
You know,
that goes both ways. The rapport has to be built too before you can even, you know, correct something. Like if you don't know somebody, it's hard to even have the conversation about correcting something. So
absolutely.
I think you're saying going back to the old school ways, right? I see Carlton now nodding, right? We're talking about like back in the day, you know, the whole block, you get beat by the whole block and then your mom beat you too, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, Carlton, what do you think about this? I know you put forth some interesting ideas on, I would describe it almost as participatory community policing, where the community plays a role in crafting policies. Can you talk a little bit more about that and explain what it is first and where or whether you've seen it work?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I work with communities across the country on advancing a model of policing reform I developed called community empowerment centered policing reform. And essentially what that means is that community members, especially those from zip codes and neighborhoods in the community where there's high levels of negative police interactions like racial profiling, excessive use of force, sexual misconduct by law enforcement, etc. Those community members especially need to be involved in, need to have knowledge of, and need to have at least 50% voting power over all police activities that are directly related to police civilian interactions, like arrests, stops, searches, uses of force, surveillance technology, the way protests are handled, etc. And so by allowing those community members to be involved, you're actually going to have a better gauge on if reforms are actually improving the situation or not, because those are the community members who are living in the neighborhoods where there's constant exposure to negative police interactions. So things are really getting better. They're going to know about it because they're in those communities, they're in those neighborhoods, they're living it. And if it's not getting better, they're also going to know that. So it's vital to have their input involved in the implementation of any kind of reforms, state or local, and to make sure that, you know, as things are changing, like if there's a pandemic or uptick in gun violence and violent crimes, to have that gauge, those fingers on the pulse on how police civilian interactions are going during that and what needs to happen to improve it, because changing situations are going to call for a different set of solutions. And so that's what I've really been addressing. Also, there's the CAP method, which is a part of community empowerment centered policing reform. It stands for C for community empowerment, A for accountability, and T for transparency. And the community empowerment component, I've already described. The accountability piece involves creating an inhospitable environment for law enforcement officers by establishing both internal and external accountability mechanisms that will work together. So internal meaning within a law enforcement agency, like an early intervention system to monitor the conduct of rank and file officers, and then an external accountability mechanism, like a civilian complaint review board that would have both subpoena powers and disciplinary powers, right? For any kind of officer that's been accused of misconduct. And then the last piece is T for transparency. Transparency, the way I define it, is the interconnectedness and coordination amongst what I call the four aspects of the community, being law enforcement, community members, elected and appointed government officials, and the news media, essentially all working together, because each one of them is a stakeholder in public safety. And in order for us to really be able to address public safety in the long term, all four of those aspects of the community need to work together as one community to support public safety and ensure police accountability through more so proactive rather than reactive strategies. So that's what I try to work on with communities. And to be honest, this is not novel. Like, I think the only thing that might be novel is putting all of it together into a process. But this has already been happening for years. A good example is Tucson, Arizona, which is, you know, red state, Trump country. This is a place where majority Republicans are in the state legislature, and they've been implementing community empowerment centered policing reforms for at least 4 years. A matter of fact, they don't just have one civilian oversight authority, they have at least 4 of them, okay? One, where community members work with law enforcement on recruitment and on promotions of law enforcement from rank and file to supervisors, so that they determine the criteria, they weigh in on that selection process. That's huge when we're talking about changing culture within law enforcement agencies. The other, they have 2 of them focused on discipline. So they have a use of force board that only focuses on use of force cases, all civilians on that board, no law enforcement. And then they have a civilian complaint review board that takes on anything and everything under the sun that's misconduct, even beyond force. And then the last thing they have for a civilian oversight authority is a board of civilians who do an annual audit of the law enforcement agency and its activities. And they produce a report on an annual basis with their findings and recommendations on how to troubleshoot, how to solve the problems within the agency. And by doing that, they've been able to have long-term change, right, over time, because just like what Ms. Castile had said earlier, you have to have that ongoing communication. You have to have that ongoing engagement in order for community members and law enforcement to work together on this. And if you don't have that, if everybody's siloed, you know, they're all in their own area pointing fingers at each other like, oh, community doesn't understand our job, or oh, law enforcement, we just need to get rid of them. At the end of the day, that's not going to help public safety. What's going to help public safety is everybody coming together and saying, this is our community, okay? We all live here, law enforcement, civilians, local elected government officials. We own this community. We're the taxpayers. What are we going to do to make sure that our public safety is being addressed, and that we're also addressing police accountability? And so that's what I try to work on with communities, is how can we take these evidence-based best practices and then try to tailor it to your specific community so it works for you.
As far as in reference to the community aspect for the recruitment, there's the one piece of like, this ran through my head as you were talking, the recruitment aspect of it. How do we recruit the officers? We need the officers in the neighborhood that can relate to the people and the demographics that aren't going to be afraid, right? Because that's a lot of what's happening, is that we're bringing these officers in from other places that haven't been in urban areas, and the fear factor is impacting the neighborhood because not just the training, but it's the fear factor. Maybe a lack of training also, but it's also the fear factor in how we're recruiting. So how do we tap that into the accountability piece? Do you have any ideas on that? How would we do that?
I think the number one thing to do is really to build trust and confidence with community members. I think that's what's going to encourage more people of color and also women to want to become law enforcement. And also people want to not only see changes happening outside of law enforcement, like with how the way law enforcement engages with civilians, but they also want to see changes with the way that law enforcement treat each other. I know in DC, for instance, there have been a number of women who work within the Metropolitan Police Department that have filed complaints about biased treatment against them, within the workplace. Things like that are not going to encourage people to want to become a police officer, right? So they need to address the internal issues around gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, as well as how that reflects with how they engage with their community members. And I think that that's how law enforcement is going to be able to do that. I also think that law enforcement needs, and I know it's different in every city, but they need to consider the criteria as it relates to juvenile offenses. We know that according to the brain science, that human beings on average don't fully develop the frontal lobes of their brain, which govern
like 23.
Yeah, until 23 or 25. And so actually use somebody's juvenile record, against them for future employment, it really doesn't make any sense knowing that to be fact, right, about the brain science. So things like that need to be factored in, especially when we're talking about low-level offenses like marijuana possession or marijuana distribution. Things like that, I think, should not be weighed as heavily against somebody, and if anything, should be seen more as like a slap on the wrist. And that would probably also encourage more people, especially from the Black community, because law enforcement targets us, even though studies have shown that our white counterparts are in possession of and traffic marijuana and use marijuana just as much as we do. We're the ones who get charges, we're the ones who get incarcerated and get a record. And so knowing that, and this is all fact, I do think that needs to be taken into consideration and not weighed so heavily. And I think that would definitely open up more doors for people of color and different races and gender to want to join law enforcement. But that's something, in my opinion, if you're already working with your community on establishing criteria for hiring people and promoting them and working with them on that, that's going to get flushed out, right? Because these are the issues that community members know about. They're hearing that from their fellow community members. So they'll communicate that to law enforcement and work out a plan on how to address it. So there's more opportunities for people of color and more diverse people. And so,
yeah. What about Minnesota, Mom? What does the police force look like? Is it diverse out there? I don't know what the numbers look like as far as your diversity out there.
I don't know what it looked like either, but I can say that what I'm hearing is that they're losing more officers are quitting, you know, and me, the way my mind go, oh, you quitting because you can't beat up on people and shoot people no more. So I don't want to be no police anymore. But you know, it's like this. Let's be honest about everything that's going on in the world. A lot of nurses and police are quitting their jobs because they're mandating that vaccine. And a lot of people that live here in Minnesota, they don't want to take that vaccine, so they're not working. They're not applying or they're quitting because they don't want to take the vaccine. But yet they'll try to blame the low rate of police applying and them quitting. They will attribute it to the violence within the community, and that's so far from the truth. You know, people need to really pay attention when these folks is talking. It is all a word game. Everything that happens, you know, just like the laws, it's the wording that can make a law work for you or against you. It could be one single word that will change the whole definition of that paragraph, or they can take that and flip it up into different ways. You know, it can mean several different things. So it's all about wording. But I think that because of that deadly force thing that they just signed, you know, like I said, they're doubling back on it. They got it at the Supreme Court already. That they wanted to go back the way it, you know, the definition. Let me see if I can find it real quick, where it says that what they're doing is making it so that, you know, people had a right in the dignity and for the sanctity of every human life. The legislature further finds and declares that every person has a right to be free from excessive use of force by officers acting under the color of the law. So they want to turn the wording back to the way it was, because right now it's like you can't shoot people in the back anymore because there has to be an imminent threat. So right now it's like, you know, what, I can't do that. I quit. You know, like a child throwing a tantrum. You know, we don't have the luxury of having one body, one legislative body that works together. We are the only state in the United States that has a divided House and Senate. You know, things may pass in the House, but once you get to the Senate, it's dead in the water. All these great things that all these proposals for police reform, they passed in the House, but then once it got to the Senate, they knocked it down. So it is frustrating to know that this is what it is. You know, if everybody was clumped together and you vote on something, a lot of this stuff probably would have passed.
Yeah, and that's why we're going to reset. Let's real quick, Tapelsha. No, Tapelsha has one more question before we go to audience questions. But real quick, I just wanted to say, as far as the accountability of people quitting, somebody wearing cameras tell what happened, right?
Yeah.
So quitting because now you see on both sides of the story, right? Yeah. You can't say you can talk about what you perceived, and that's real when you're in the moment, what you perceived and what really would happen. But when you play that camera and you see what you see, and you know, as we all unfortunately saw in the situation with Philando, when you see what you see, there's nothing that you can articulate that is going to excuse that bad conduct or that, you know, or that use of force or that escalation of the use of force when you didn't do A, B, and C and all the things that you should have done. So I think the body worn camera is one step in the right direction for the accountability piece. But then, like you also said, Carlton, on the inside, that stuff has to be applied across the board according to the conduct, and who, you know, it has to be fair and has to be equitable across the board to really build the bridges in the community like we say we are. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, you're right. I want to ask both of you one more question before we go to the audience questions. We have some questions from the audience. We talked about this a little bit. So last year, after the racial reckoning that was caused by George Floyd's death, Minneapolis City Council, I believe, announced they were going to disband the police department. It was a big deal. It got a lot of coverage. And then last week, the week before, I heard that it was voted down by the people. So I just wanted to get you all's perspective on that, really on the whole, what's called the defund the police movement. And I agree, Mama Val, like wording matters a lot, because defund the police doesn't really mean defund the police. It means reallocating responsibility and resources so that the police actually have less of a burden. They actually don't have to handle all these things they currently handle, like mental health crises and homeless people and minor domestic disputes that can end in death unnecessarily if they show up with guns blazing. So I wanted to get you all's thought on that movement overall, and then what just happened in Minneapolis with the shift not occurring as they declared last year. Whoever wants to go first. And then we're going to go to Kim with the audience Q&A.
Well, that whole bit, you know, I was taken aback when they jumped out there and said, get rid of the police altogether. You know, I was like, oh my God, somebody's awfully mad right now because that's nonsense. I mean, just we're gonna get rid of the police, but you don't have a plan. What's the next step? You know, I can see if you have a legitimate outline on what's going to happen and what's going to take place of the police, and it's strategically laid out, and you say we don't need the police anymore, we can police ourselves, you know. And then, you know, in a crazy sense, it don't make it's not all bad, because for one thing, okay, you got your community crime. And then you, in addition to the community crime, you got the police coming in committing crimes as well. So if we just leave them out, we fend for ourselves, we only have to worry about one set of criminals, and that's the community crime. You know what I'm saying? But you know, I just thought maybe they misinterpreted what was meant, and they were saying defund the police and not debunkle. Something the police. I was just like, oh, they misunderstood what that meant. But what we were saying about defunding the police is just what it is. You know, we need the police, but we don't always need guns at every situation. Every call did not require a weapon. And then you talk about how stretched the police force is. You know, some calls you don't need 5 squads. You know what I'm saying? You see the police stop somebody, and then you see about 4 or 5 more squads pull up. You know, and that means that's 10 people on one traffic stop. So
that depends on the neighborhood too. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. See where I live out there, that's what I see because of where I live, you feel me? So defunding the police, we were just asking that, you know, like with every ticket that's given, the police gets a percentage of that ticket. And when they tow your vehicle, it goes to the police impound. So if you can't afford to go and get your car because you have to show proof of insurance and a valid driver's license. Okay, if you can't get your car at the impound, it's sold. So the money that is paid for your vehicle goes to the police. Okay, then you get when the police confiscate your stuff, they take your house from you. They take all your cars and your artwork. And when they sell that, the police gets a percentage of confiscated goods. which none of that money goes back into the neighborhoods where it's taken. So we wanted them to allocate some of that funding into reasonable resources and invest that money into the Black community so we can create some things for our young people. You know, it's been 30 years, you know, you constantly seeing stuff closed down and nothing is taking its place. You know, they're closing down the Boys and Girls Club. Do you see another one come back up? No. Okay, they closed down this Black business. You see another one come back? Nope. You see another ethnic group come in there and open up this store. You know, it's all about just putting money and funding back into the African American and you know, people of color communities. And that's what we meant by defunding the police. And that way other sections of public safety can open up where you know, when a call is made for someone that's having a mental health crisis, you have someone that is educated in that field that can go and you know, diffuse that situation. You know, we want our police to be exactly who they are and what they represent. We want them to be a police service and not a police force. So it's all about partnering with the community and coming together, and instead of being a law enforcement, they come and interrupt the violence. That's what we want to see happen with our police. And yeah, that defunding is the best way to get past a situation is to create fear. You know, it's, oh, if they get rid of the police, they just gonna let the criminals run wild. Oh my God, if the police go away, then nobody's safe. And then, you know, they don't make it no better. They be like, yeah, defund the police, so they'll be coming in your neighborhood next, you know, just stirring the heck out of people. So they like, oh no, we cannot have that. We're not getting rid of the police because of that fear. You know, if you want to discredit anything, puts that fear in that heart, and it's gonna say the way it is. But yeah, it's all about communication and accepting that olive branch. You know, we've been throwing the olive branch out there for decades, and they just looking at it like next year, better luck next year. But I would love to see things change in a more positive way. And for, you know, I'm all for the police not going on every call, because the guns are not needed, and it's intimidating. And if a person going through a mental health crisis, you know, it's frustrating for them. You know, you bringing guns, you know, I'm off my meds. Can't you understand that? You know, and it's just that we have to keep plugging at it. You know, what we didn't get this year, we gonna tackle it next year. We're gonna have these town hall meetings. We're gonna get together with the police, and we're gonna share ideas and share some of the solutions that we may come up with. But it's all about joining forces instead of dividing further and, you know, pointing fingers. If you don't do this, you don't do that. You know, I mean, this is not, I promise you, this is not how God intended for us to coexist. It's just not. It has gotten so ugly and mean that our citizens are weaponizing our police. You know, they get on the phone and call and lie on you. The police come with their hand on the gun. You know, you don't even know the woman that lied on me that quick, but you already, because she's white, you believe her, and till somebody show a video, then that makes them change their mind when there's a video. But yeah, it's we have got to stay strong in this fight, and just, you know, make our presence known, because if you're not seated at the table, you definitely on the menu. So we don't want to be on the
That's
menu.
right.
We
about
want to
it.
sit at the table and we gonna eat with you and we gonna discuss some things, you know? Yeah.
No, you're right. Beautifully said. Carlton, do you want to weigh on this quickly before we go to the
Yeah.
audience questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, definitely. I completely agree with Ms. Castile. And in my opinion, I think that the reason why people last year during the protests were so focused on money, on defund, for substantive police accountability, which is really what protesters were demanding, is that we don't want to have, an ice cream truck with law enforcement giving out ice cream to kids. Like, that's not the kind of policing reform we want to see. We want to see substantive police accountability. And the reason why they targeted defund was because we live in a capitalist democratic society where money equals power. And so if you want to take away power from somebody, then you target their money, right? And I do think at the end of the day, the underlying issue that protesters want to see addressed is having substantive police accountability. Now, the good news is that a number of states, like I said, over 30 of them passed laws, including a number of municipalities, on comprehensive policing reform. And for instance, Illinois, where I live at, recently passed the Safety Act. That's our policing reform bill. I worked on it with members of the Legislative Black Caucus on that policing reform language. And one of the things it has in there is for mandatory law enforcement officer trainings for crisis intervention technique training. So that's when officers respond to somebody going through like a mental health needs crisis, etc. Now those trainings for new cadets and in-service officers have to be done in collaboration amongst law enforcement personnel, the local mental health providers, families of people with mental health needs, and with advocates, all working together on essentially proactively strategizing how do they want their law enforcement to respond to these situations. Going further, should it be a mental health provider by themselves that responds with no law enforcement? Should it be just law enforcement, or should it be both a mental health provider and law enforcement? In my opinion, it should be the community that should decide how they want their community to be policed. And I think that that's one solution that Illinois has shown in its state law that can hopefully be replicated for other mandatory trainings, even for like use of force. So.
Yeah, that's
Got
perfect.
it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So Kim, I want to bring in Kimberly Robinson Alexander, another one of our leaders in Mob United who's been monitoring Facebook and Zoom for questions. Kim, you have questions?
Yes, we do. What a powerful conversation and a display of strength. Thank you so much. The first question we have, we talked a little bit about Mama Val being thrust into the international spotlight, but we didn't really talk a lot about how she felt. So Mama Val, how have you felt being thrusted into the spotlight, and how do you manage your own self-care?
Being put in this position has been very, very challenging, to say the least. I'm human just like anyone else, and it is difficult. I promise you that. When I wouldn't wish this feeling on anyone. It's just a horrible feeling every day. Every day is a challenge. Some days I don't feel like getting out of the bed. And then, like I said, I rely heavily on my faith in the spirit of my son and the ancestors. And they kind of talk me through it, especially when I have something to do. It's like, you need to get up because your community needs you, and I have my low points. There's never really a high point. Everything is kind of mediocre for me now, and I just take her, my daughter, and God blessed us with 2 grandbabies. So they keep my mind occupied. I don't have a whole lot of time to, sit down and just constantly think about my son and, the horrible way that he left this planet. They give me joy, and I just love them so much, and they love their grandmother, and I just take it one day at a time. You know, I do a lot of praying and just focusing on the greater good. You know, all this, you know, my son didn't die in vain. You know, things are happening, things are moving forward, things are changing, and that's what keeps me going, just to see that other people care, how much people have supported and rallied and fought. You know, if you fighting, I'm out there, I'm swinging right along with you, you know, and that's what keeps me going. Just being able, you know, God blesses me to wake up in the morning and I say, thank you, Lord, another day to fight.
Thank you so much for sharing that. This question, I actually would like to get every panel member's response. What else can we do to move the needle in a big way? Local legislative change is meaningful, but at times it feels painfully slow. And I think that each of you has a different perspective on that. And I would like to start with Dipelsha.
Oh, wow. I wasn't like prepared for that, but I think the main thing is staying present and vigilant and not giving up, because what we see over and over again is that people, when the story's in the news and there's another case and everyone sees the video and everyone's outraged, everyone shows up, what can we do? Everyone wants to talk about it, do something, watch the movie, read the book, and then it goes off the news and people go back to their daily lives. And that's how those who do not want progress to happen win, because they don't take a break. Like, they are steadily trying to keep justice from us. Like, they don't stop their work. So we can't stop our work just because it's not in the news. And that's really what Mob United is all about, or at least the intention, to have a steady drumbeat of advocacy and discussion and pressure around these issues, so that whether it's in the news or not, we still care and we're still trying to move the ball forward. So I think consistency is often the biggest missing link, that people show up in a reactionary way, but they're not proactive, they're not preventative. You know, like some moms in our group have lost sons, many have not. We don't want to. So I'm not going to wait until it happens to me to take action. I'm going to take action now, because I don't want anyone else to have to go through what Mama Val has gone through. So if I summed it up in one word, it would be consistent presence and action and advocacy.
And Carlton?
I believe that we need to continue to push forward from different angles, continue to push on the national legislation, continue to focus on state and local. And when I say state and local, meaning any kind of laws that need to get passed, get them done, and any laws that are passed, to monitor them for implementation and start to hold those accountable for implementing it. But one thing I'll say that I do think is, I think the biggest accomplishment coming out of last year's protest and demands has been this momentum behind decertification. So in other words, revoking the license of a law enforcement officer. So the license is what gives a person police powers to arrest people, use deadly force, get all those protections and privileges that law enforcement has. It also allows law enforcement to transfer from one law enforcement agency to another. So if you take away that license, then you're taking away a person's police power and their ability to transfer from one law enforcement agency to another. And that is very powerful. There's a lot of states, ever since last year's protest, that have passed laws to decertify officers and expanding the list of what would make them eligible to be decertified, to be beyond just committing criminal acts, but also to commit actions that are unethical. So I do think that that's a good thing. And I think looking more at the implementation, once again, of those laws is going to be key for substantive police accountability.
Thank you. Lisa?
I think for me, kind of going back to something Mama Val said, I think we need more Black Blue moms at the table, at the police table, to hold folks accountable, to call them out, to use our voices, to tell them, you know, that we are at the table, we demanding change, and it has to be equitable and fair across the board. And our voices, if we're not at the table to call out the implicit biases and the microaggressions and the things that are happening, then it continues, right? We can do all the talk on the front end, and we say all the things that sound good, the sound bites, but then if internally it's not working, and that you know that things are in shambles internally as far as biases and misconduct and things that aren't being done the way that they should be, we can't fix them if we're not at the table. So it's twofold. We got to be on the inside working out, and we need the outside working in. So it needs to be happening simultaneously.
And Mama Val, do you want to weigh in?
I feel like, we have to stay vigilant and stay in their face. We have to be out there and let them know that we're not going anywhere. We want to be at the table. We want to be seen. We want to advocate for the laws and bills that have been passed, and to continue to advocate for the ones that haven't. And just to be out there and be present and let your voices be heard. And I think that we just need people. We need bodies, because like our sister said, when the cameras are rolling, people are out there, and once the cameras go away, they go away as well. And strength comes in numbers. As long as we keep that number up and keep advocating for the things that have changed, and make sure that the piece about if the implementation is being done by having that data accessible, have a website where these policies have been put in place, but are they being implemented? Is there somewhere where we can look at that data and make sure that you're doing what you said that you were gonna do? And just keep focused on just making things better, and putting one foot in front of the other, and just stand tall and believe in what you believe in, and things will change. If we these little things that we have accomplished, we've been trying to get them for decades. The chokehold, and another piece that they did here in the state of Minnesota, they banned it, warrior style training here in Minnesota, because that young man that murdered my son, he had went through that kill them before they kill you type training that they were doing. And they were so angry about that, they started to give the training off the books. You know what I'm saying? It's treacherous here, baby. They, you do something and try to take a step forward, they gonna try to take you back 3 steps. If that's why it's so important to vote. This 2020 is so important, because things are changing, and on the back end, they somewhere trying to counteract what has already been changed, and we ain't the wiser. Just like that deadly force piece, you can't shoot people in the back. They right there, they down there right now trying to get the stuff changed back. You know what I'm saying? But don't nobody know about that. And it just so happened, I just love my God. Lord have mercy, I love my God, because I wasn't looking for that article. It just came up on my phone. And
that is a great transition to, what do we tell our children? One of the moms wants to know, you gave Philando to talk, you had that conversation with him, but it didn't, she said it didn't work for you. What do we say to our children in light of the difficulty in getting officers to see them as we see them?
See, that's the main thing right there, that negative perception. We have always been looked at as a threat. Even people coming over here from different countries, the first thing they tell them is, be careful around them Black folks, because they're thieves and thugs and gangsters and killers. They put that narrative out there that we're just the most horrible human beings that walk the earth. But I can just say with the way that the tide is shifting, you keep talking to your kids. Don't never not talk to your children. Keep talking to your children and letting them know that, don't do this, don't do that. Don't do as I do as I say. okay? And just make sure that they doing everything that they need to do to be a productive citizen out here. You know, we don't know who we gonna run into, because I did everything humanly possible, but my son still ran into an idiot that didn't value his life. And the courts agreed that my son was not as valuable as this man's life. That guy's life was more valuable than the life that my son was living. They equated the two and chose him, and there was no accountability whatsoever. And we just have to keep talking to our children. You know, it may seem futile, but it's better to give them and teach them to not. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And last question before I turn it back over to Depelsha. Where can we find resources on learning how to be effective grassroots organizations? And I'll have each one of you answer, and Depelsha give the final answer, as Mob United is a grassroots organization, and she can share some information about her org.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are so many. Minnesota has more organizations than any other state in the United States, I do believe. And all I can say is, you know, you can Google whatever you're looking for, and some type of organization will pop up that can assist you in whatever it is you need. And we do have that 411 phone number available, where you, if there's something that you need, then they can assist you in that way. And my foundation, we have a list of resource centers and things like that that can help families and whatever you're looking for, because that's what we do. We help families that loses a loved one to gun violence, and we help reduce the negative lunch balances within our school districts. But we also have information on other organizations and what they have going on that we can share and make that public as well. But it's just so enlightening to see that all these great organizations have developed, and how much they are bringing to the table, and trying to make sure that things are changing for the better, because this has been a struggle, a 400-year struggle, and we're still struggling. And it's some of the same issues that we have been dealing with for forever. You know, it's nothing that none of this stuff is new. See, I'm not a young mom. You know, I'm 65 years old. I've been there, I've done that. I've seen it, I've tasted, I've smelled it, and you can't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. You know, absolutely not. And that's the problem with a lot of people. You know, they tell them it is one thing when it is so much different. And we have to start believing in our own selves, and what we see with our own eyes. Stop letting people tell you you didn't see what you saw. You know, you saw exactly what happened, but then they tell you that, oh, well, he was resisting. How the hell you resisting? And you seatbelted in your car. You know, things just don't make sense, but then people will let someone tell them that it is something different. But Lord have mercy, we just got to keep on pushing and doing what we need to do, and getting all that great information out there, and have it readily available for people when they in need.
And Carlton, those who are interested in legislative change?
Yeah, I would say to definitely track what's going on with the different state and local laws that passed this year. I know a really good website for that would be Ballotpedia is one of them. You can find information on what's happened in every state and locality on that website, very accurate information. And then the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL, is another good source of information on what's been passed into law on the state and local level in different states and municipalities around the country. So to kind of have your fingers on the pulse on that, especially as it relates to where you live. Knowledge is power. When you know what the law is, that does give you power in regards to what needs to get done to implement it to bring about the change we want to see. But you first have to be educated. And I think that right now we have all these laws that passed, and there's not as much education happening to educate the public on what's been done. So that way we know what next steps are going to look like to make sure that we're bringing about that change. And so that's something I think that would be excellent to check out those two websites and to get more information on what's happening in your state and municipality.
Thank you so much. And Depelsha, how does one get involved in Mob United?
Sure. So I will tell a little bit about the resources we have, and you should probably be answering this question, Kim, since you're heading up a lot of it. But one, we've been hosting these kind of conversations for 5 years. So you can go on our website and find our website or on our public Facebook page where this is happening now, and look through all the videos. We've posted topics like how to interact safely with law enforcement, dealing with trauma, a lot of things around mental health, the school to prison pipeline. There are a lot of educational resources there that you can just go back and learn a lot from all of our expert speakers who we've had over the past 5 years. And also we're building a database of resources called Mob Connections. Kim is actually leading up that work, where we're trying to go state by state to build out a comprehensive database so that if people have a need for different type of professional services, whether it be an attorney, educational advocate, mental health advocate, we're trying to have some kind of pre-screen vetting process where we get recommendations for people who have used these people's services, know they're culturally aware, and will treat our sons with dignity and respect, so that you can search these professionals. And we have in many cases worked with moms one-on-one to be connected to resources in that way, but we were trying to scale that across all 50 states. So that's what we're doing. But I just want to thank our guests so much for being here today. This has been a wonderful conversation. And I really thank both of you for just sharing your knowledge, your insights, pouring out your heart. Mama Val, it's been just a joy to hear you and get to know you better. And we look forward to staying connected and staying in touch. We are going to wrap up because we said it was going to end an hour and a half. I'm actually going to a Broadway show tonight with New York Mob United chapter members. We're going to see Thoughts of a Colored Man, which is very appropriate for our organization. And we have to head out soon. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I want to share one thing we have coming up next week. Let's see if I can do this with some ease. 1 second, where is I have too many things open to get to the slide, but here we go. So next week, we're going to have a special conversation with a physician, Dr. Chris Purnell, who is a medical expert, and we're going to talk about this pandemic and COVID-19. Everybody knows that vaccines for kids 5 to 11 were just approved for emergency use authorization. A lot of people have reservations about it, questions. So we're going to talk about that, masking, just where we are in the pandemic overall, and get her expertise. So come with your questions, whatever your concerns are. My oldest son, who's 13, had the vaccine in August, and my youngest son just got his first dose today. So we're on the path, but I know people have a lot of questions and concerns. We want to invite you to that. It's a special session we're having this month on this topic next Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern time. But thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Do either of you want to have any final words?
I just want to talk about the Peace Garden. Give Minnesota is coming up November the 18th. And if you would like to donate to the Peace Garden, the maintenance of it, because we've gotten the funds to have it built, renewed, and we were just looking for funds to for the maintenance part of it. You can go to Give Minnesota, Philando Castile Peace Garden.
Okay, we can search on Google for, is it giveminnesota.org or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll post that on the Facebook stream so people will know that.
Absolutely. And I just want the best for everybody. And I love you for all the great work that all of you are doing. It's just phenomenal that we can work collectively and try to come up with some type of solutions.
Amen.
Love you.
Yeah.
Love you too.
All right. Good night. All right. See you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. Good night.
everyone.
Right.